This episode of the Better Two podcast is brought to you by Kitty Mystic and DM Needham, author of My Days with the Dark Muse, as well as Love is Worth Waiting For. Hi gang, Donna here. Thanks for tuning in to the Better Two podcast. Today's guest is Jennifer Peavey. She decided, like several other people we've talked to in the past, to leave her job in corporate America. It was kind of a slow transition, but she decided that she needed to take care of herself and do something that was right for her. She also wrote a book called Natural Reflectors. It has a workbook as well, and she discusses that too. Our conversation kind of goes all over the place, which if you've listened to the podcast before, you know that. But we dabble in expectations, we dabble in self-care a lot, and what we can do for ourselves to make ourselves happy and to pursue our passion. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hi, Jennifer. How are you doing today?
I am good. And how are you?
I'm good. Would you care to explain what is behind you?
So actually, this was one of my first attempts. We're going to talk about my leaving corporate America, but this is string art. Okay. That one of my first things I did was say I love string art. I loved it as a child, and I chose to make 50 pieces. I'm not sure. Let's see. I've got 5 by 9, so 45. I've got another 5 upstairs. I just haven't hung up yet. But part of it was just going through what would the process be, and I was trying to be efficient about it. To say, okay, how long does it take me to make these things, and just exploring it.
I remember that as a kid too. I never really got to do it, but I do remember, the little nails and the board. Yeah. But we didn't really get to do it. My mom was, as much as she liked creative stuff, she didn't really want to do that. So. And
it's probably the noise, the hammering.
I always wanted to be a drummer, but yeah, she said no to that too. So there you go. Closest I got was pots and pans, and that was short-lived.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's go talk about why you left corporate America. I mean, a lot of people are doing it now. It's not, I don't want to say it's a trend, but I think We're all kind of seeing the value of our own value and how do we fit in. So why did you do it?
So it was actually a very slow thing that happened. My first degree was in engineering. My father was an engineer and my mother was a math teacher. So it seemed very logical that I would go in some sort of STEM something. And I did that for probably 19 years, which is far longer than I thought I would be in that position. I received a call from a recruiter to go into innovation. So it was more about the business side, but still part of the technology, but it was almost like being a startup within a company. And I found I liked that I felt like I had more to bring to the table than just the math and science. And I was introduced to industrial design while I was part of that. And that was now about people and how they interacted with things and this empathy thing. And I really enjoyed that. Being the engineer, I'm not the one to be chatty at a party. I will talk to people, as we have an in-depth conversation, but chit chat was not my thing. But to observe people and try to figure out why they do things and how they pick up, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And so from there, I got the chance to actually go back and get an industrial design degree. So there was all these things that were changing. While I was in school, management changed at the company I was at. And when I came back, the original plan of my starting a design center within that company was then not such a great idea. And they were more interested in going back to, I wouldn't say traditional, but another thread that was more an MBA view of things. And what I had learned was not as valuable. I could have gone the way they were going, but I felt like I had gone to school and I had worked really hard to become this industrial designer, and I wanted to keep that. So I ended up taking a package. From there, what I was able to do was take my technical background and that innovation background in design and put it all together. And I went from there and helped out research at the university where I had gotten the industrial design degree and was working on prototyping. How could I take a faculty research project and actually apply it to something? In this case, it was clothing. We were making smart clothing and trying to figure out where people would wear this and how they would do it. The contract was only for a year. And so then I was freelancing on my own. And so that was, it kind of happened over time, but there was this intentional choice of saying I had gone down this creative path And I wanted to be able to continue down that creative path. And it was just a bit different than what corporate wanted. So that's kind of how I left.
And, I've noticed that some companies now they're either very, very much employee oriented or they're not. And they want to go back to the way things were done. But the thing is, we've evolved. And with the pandemic, we've learned that you can function differently.
Yep, absolutely. And I think part of it too is even if they are employee focused, a company can still be business focused. They've got to make money. And as a whole, that's the reason everybody has a job. An individual who's growing, like I was going through a lot of personal growth with all of those career changes, it doesn't always fit. And sometimes you do grow to a different place. And I am certain the pandemic gave a lot of people a chance to grow in different ways. I know it did for me, but part of it was I was outside of the system as well. Even those within the system had this opportunity to feel and think differently.
When I look back at my career in insurance, I mean, the first company that I worked as an adjuster, not in clerical, but as an adjuster, we had very much a camaraderie. It was a very strong family unit in the company. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody was personal.
Yep.
And then they decided that they were going to move the office 20 miles away.
Yep.
And that's when you start seeing the people jumping ship, because it's like, no, I'm not going to do this. And then the environment of this family fun place suddenly becomes toxic and overbearing.
Yeah.
And as I moved companies, I continued to see the shift. Things became more concise. It's like, okay, we're going to make everybody do this now. And you're going to do 5 different jobs instead of having everybody in a niche or niche. And all it does is make you feel like a hamster on a wheel.
Yeah. Or like I like to say is that we become machines. Mm-hmm. And we often, I think even pre-pandemic, we assumed that we could be machines. Mm-hmm. And that we were just supposed to be churning this out. And quite honestly, it's not just corporate. I'm certain that in my engineering degree, I was also taught similarly, we are to produce. And I even see that with students today, that they feel very strongly that the decisions they make today are going to affect their entire lives. And they become very bogged down with the seriousness of this decision. And part of what I learned in the pandemic was you're going to change. And you're going to change multiple times. And that needs to be okay. Not only personally, but it needs to be okay with the corporations that, hey, I'm different. And maybe the corporation has changed, but you can not make it personal. We can go and just move on to whatever our next phase is.
I mean, if you look at that, look at Madonna.
Yes.
And Miley Cyrus, they reinvent themselves constantly, and we evolve. Our opinions change.
Yes.
And, when you think about it, we are taught at school to produce. Our parents send us to school and they reinforce you best have good grades. And I remember, I guess about 10 years ago, one of my friends, they were starting junior high, and she's like, oh, we're already talking about what college she's going to. And I'm like, what?
Oh, I know. And that's one of my things about the magnet schools. How do you know that a 5-year-old wants to be STEM or a 5-year-old is going to learn languages? How? I didn't even know at 17.
No.
How?
No, that's exactly. It's like when she said this, I looked at my husband. I'm like, because we didn't have kids. I'm like, can you imagine? I mean, there's no way. I remember my junior year, everybody in my senior class was buying their rings. And I'm like, I'm not getting mine. They're like, why are you not getting? I'm like, there's no guarantee. And it's not that I wasn't going to graduate. Right. But what if something happened? I mean, you could get in a car accident and be forced to miss a year of school or months. Yep. But we're all getting our class rings. I'm like, I'll get it next year when I'm a senior. I'm not going to jump the shark.
Right.
So it blows my mind that you're putting this to a kid now that you're going to do this. And I remember growing up and hearing that Russia would say, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to study this. But yet, aren't we kind of doing the same thing now with our kids? If you're pushing them to exceed or excel?
Right. Absolutely. And I know for me, I think that's one of the things, maybe the pandemic gave us permission But the idea of leaving that kind of you must, like mine was, you must be employed. This idea of ever having a business on my own or supporting myself in multiple ways was nothing, that was never in my mindset ever until 2019. And I've gone through a number of emotional roller coasters of panic, this little person inside of me going, no, you're supposed to be employed. It takes a lot to be able to say, I'm going to do something different. You know, a lot of us may be saying, I'm going to leave this particular job, but you're still going to go corporate in another way. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's interesting what biases sit there, even if we are taking a change, what other biases are layering on top of that we still impose rules on ourselves. And I know nobody was telling me I had to be employed. It was me. It was the little voice inside of my head that was saying, no, you must do it this way.
No, I get it, because I remember thinking, you know, I worked in clerical and everything, and I was in a sales job, and I had been in the sales job for three years, and had the opportunity to go into television production, something that I would love to do. So I had the opportunity. It was going to definitely be guaranteed through the summer. And I was going to be in charge of the production in a lot of different ways, which I did. And it was the best summer job ever. I worked my butt off, but it was awesome, you know? And it came down to, in the following October, we were wrapping everything up, and it's like, okay, you have to make a choice. You have to decide whether you want the safety net of a real job, or are you going to go try and become a PA somewhere else?
Yeah.
And I look back and I took the safety net.
Yeah.
I went into hotel, and then I went into insurance as a claims adjuster. And it was just like, all right, I'm set now. I can make a career of this.
Yep.
So something about security is ingrained in us, that you have to have that security, especially as a woman.
Yeah. And it is important. And I remember starting out, that's one reason I did choose engineering at the time. It was a stable, predictable job. Now, the year I graduated was the big year that everybody started these layoffs. I mean, it was a big deal at that time period. But it was because of that security. I knew that I would be able to take care of myself no matter what happened in my future. But there are trade-offs with that. You know, you end up saying, what about my soul? And what about my heart? And what about, you know, and you hope for those other things, which I think is one reason startups are so popular. Not just the grasping for money, but I think people feel like they're able to do their own thing. They're able to create or be passionate about something, particularly these social entrepreneurs that, you know, if you're going to work this hard, you might as well work that hard for yourself, type of thing, or for what you believe in.
Right. And I mean, being passionate about something is very important, because, you know, the one thing that you can talk to people that are in a job 20 years and it's like, I really need to get out of it. I remember being at the intern's job when I finally reached the upper echelon of management. It was just kind of like, all right, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. Right. And I had only been in it like, I think 6 or 7 years. And I had friends that weren't in 20, and I'm just like, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it. So, and I think at a certain point we have to look at what is healthy for us, because we don't look at the toxic stress. We don't look at the mental toll of it.
Right. Exactly. And I think part of it is because we are so focused on today or this week or this quarter. It's a very short-term view. And we're just trying to survive, I think, when it comes down to it. One of the things that I found during the pandemic is being able to have a more long-term view, because I did have, the luxury of not being employed. I had this moment where I had to say, what am I going to do? And what do I want to do? What is worth it to me to actually put the effort into it? And then that becomes a longer term view. Then being able to see how all these short-term projects or all these short little details would fit into that larger whole. And I'm still trying to figure that out, but or figure out how all that goes together. But it was really about the fact of being able to look bigger and then look smaller and look bigger, and being able to cycle between the two, that I found a lot more peace. Because then I knew, even if today, like when we started this, I am a bit frazzled today, but I know it's supporting something bigger that I really want.
Right. Well, and that's the thing about, we'll talk about podcasting for a second. There is so many people that do podcasts now. It's
Right.
a huge market. But the fact of the matter, if you look statistically, most podcasters will start off doing maybe 5 episodes and then they're
Right.
done.
Right.
And so you have to, when I first started, it was kind of like, I had the radio background, but it was just kind of like, I don't know. But the more I do it, the more I'm learning about myself, the more I'm
Sure.
helping others I know. And it's become a passion because I get to talk to different people and go through their experience. But there is that thing of, what am I doing?
Yeah.
What's the long-term goal here? And that's where you have to try to dissect things. And I'm sure you're in that place yourself, because how do you see that long-term goal when not everything is going smoothly, like you're frazzled today?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is not only being frazzled, but it's easy to go along with what works easily. So I think that's one reason I ended up in engineering. I was good at math and science. It was easier for me to pick up than it would have been the arts or English. So I went with it. And so you could readily say, all right, I already have got the skills to do a podcast. I've got this network, you've already done it for however long. So it's a whole lot easier for me to keep going in that vein. Mm-hmm. I think the long-term view then gives me is, okay, what if the podcast was a tool? And so what are you passionate about that would allow you to use that tool to go towards it? So it has become a thing for me to look at the small bites and give meaning to the small bites. So in fact, I have just started hosting Airbnb literally last week. I have my first guest this weekend. And so that's really just the thing. It's just saying, okay, what does it take to host? Before that, it was, what does it take to get it online and get the listing done? Now, what does it take to host? And I can tell you, I had to tear apart a toilet this morning. That's part of the reason I'm frazzled, is the tank was leaking and I pulled it apart and I thought I had the right parts. And of course I don't. That means you have to go back to Lowe's, and that's the reason I'm feeling frazzled, is I have guests coming and I got to get a toilet working,
Yeah.
But I know that one of my goals is to have a retirement gig. And I want to build it long before I'm in retirement, because I want to get to that point where the skills, like you say, how to do a podcast, the mechanics of it. That's like breathing to you. I want to get to the point with this new thing that it's like breathing. And then therefore I can start directing it to what I'm passionate about. And that might be part of the issue, is that you have to learn things, even when we switch, and that hurdle to having to learn the new things or how to figure it out. That's a big deal, particularly if you're burned out.
Yeah. But the one thing is, even if it's intimidating, the process of learning something, the payoff once you succeed in it.
Absolutely.
I mean, I remember it was a Sunday a couple of years ago. I have no heating background at all.
Yeah.
And our heater went out.
Yes.
And I called the guy and he's like, well, I can't be out there for another 2.5 hours. And, I really don't want you to be. He's like, can you talk to me on the phone and take some pictures? I'm like, sure. So I took pictures and he told me what I needed to do. And I had us back up and running. And I was like, okay. And I felt like, look what I did.
Of course.
I had help, but still.
I go to YouTube a lot.
Oh, yeah.
There was a 6-minute video this morning I went through 3 times.
I mean, it's an incredible thing. And I like being an empowered woman. I hate to say it that way, but I remember, when my stepfather taught me how to drive, he says to me, he's like, okay, if you're going to learn to drive, you're going to learn how to fix a car. Now, the irony here is my dad owned his own garage, but he was in New Orleans. I was in Shreveport. So he taught me to change the oil, taught me to do a spark plug change. I knew how to change a tire, no problem. And when I met my first husband and we were together, he was going to do a brake job. I'm like, well, let me help you. No, that's man's work.
Yeah, no.
And my second husband, I'm like, I'm going to go get an air filter. Okay. He stands at the end of the aisle, watches me walk past all these guys, gets the air filter and comes back and he looks at me and goes, I love you.
Yes. And that is really, I'm coming to the point, not only with men, but with my job, with my friends, that should be the way it is. Mm-hmm. You are who you are, you go and do it, and they appreciate it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
you grow by being able to do things for yourself. While it's nice to have, I mean, I wouldn't go changing a tire now because I don't think I could do it. If I was required, I most likely could, but it would not be
Yes.
good for me physically.
Yes.
But, back in the day, I was in heels and I could do it in the snow. I mean, it sounds like somebody
Yes.
going to school in the snow, but
Yes.
back then it was the empowering thing. I mean, I had moved up here and my friend had a blowout. And so we parked in this old spaghetti warehouse parking lot. I have stuff in the back of the car. So we have to take all the boxes out. Mind you, there's snow and ice everywhere.
Yep.
And so we're getting the tire out. This guy comes out in a 3-piece suit and his coat, looks at us. He goes, "Oh, you have me blocked in. I'll come back after." Doesn't offer to help or anything. Now I live in a small town. I was getting air in my tire and some guy's like, "Oh, I'll help you with that." I'm like,
yeah,
okay, if you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
My damsel in distress if you want.
Yeah. And I think that is actually a more evolved state. The empowered was one thing to prove to ourselves that we could do it. But the fact of letting somebody help you is then now I can do it. But sure, if you're willing to do it, I'll let you, because it is sometimes easier to have help or to do it together.
Mm-hmm. But I think that we were taught also that, nobody else is going to do it as good as I can. Right. They're going to do it the wrong way and I'm just going to have to go back and redo it. So let me do it and not worry about getting help.
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time defining good enough, even for myself. Just saying it maybe it's not so much that what somebody else does, but as I do something, particularly when I want to go through iterations, take this small bite and build it. What I'm doing right now, for example, with the Airbnb is good enough. Now I have all sorts of dreams of other things on how much further I want to take it, but this is good enough to get started. And I actually have to write that down because I will forget, getting lost in the details, that, oh, I want to add shower bombs, and oh, I want a fire pit, and oh, I want an outdoor kitchen. Well, if I wait for all those things, how many times or how many people would I not meet in there?
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, when I launched this in January, I had an audio problem. I did the first one with my friend, and then I was like, by March, I still hadn't done it. And I'm like, get off the pot, do it or get off the pot. You need to get it done. Otherwise, so I decided I'll put myself in the hot seat. I'll do it. And then that was it. I just started the momentum because otherwise it was never going to be good enough. And I came to the point where you have to just do it.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things I've also come to is I created a structure so I could make a to-do list like that and say, this needs to be done. But then I also see, I've defined my good enough. I defined my intent for whatever I'm doing. I get distracted. I go down the road. I'm trying to get it done. At some point, I will stop and I'll look back and say, this is what I intended and this is what my good enough is. And I'll realize I met that 2 weeks ago. I had blown past it and I have gone down that road. And I'm able to celebrate that, or at least I create space, because I was really bad in the past. Prior to 2019, I would just, barrel on through and keep on going and push and push and push. And now I stop and I celebrate that moment. Hey, I accomplished good enough. But what happens is now when I have something that's irritating me or something that is bothering me, I know I have enough trust that I will get to it. I just need to change its priority. If it's bothering me that much, okay, well, then the next time I reflect, I need to bring that up and make that a priority. But I can trust myself that I will get to it. It's just, like I said, where is it in the line? Where is it on the to-do list?
And sometimes the other things come up and that has to take priority.
Like a toilet. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the thing. We were taught that you need to focus on one task. You can't deviate from that task until it's done, but sometimes things happen and we have to be more forgiving of ourselves to allow ourselves to go with the flow. Yes.
And not just forgiving, but kind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes back to that voice in my head, is being able to say, hey, you did get XYZ done and I'm proud of you for doing that. And when it becomes time, you will take care of that too.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's a very nice space to be in, to be kind. It doesn't always happen for me, but I'm very grateful that has become a habit.
Do you think that it was your parents that put that voice in your head, or schooling that put that voice in your head that, well, that's not good enough. It could be better.
Somewhere in there. I don't know if I could point exactly to it, but yes, it definitely had to come from childhood and my education. And maybe it's something about the media, about things being perfect. Part of it could be engineering, is just, you're always looking for perfect. Part of what I learned when I went to design school was this idea of iterations, that I realized from my engineering background that I assumed I would do everything once. And if you're only going to do things once, yes, it must be perfect, because otherwise it's going to fail or it's going to break, or, whatever it is. But this idea of, I'm going to try something, see if that works, and then I'm going to add to it. That's it's a different way of looking at it. It's a different way of coming up with things. And I know I was never taught that, whether it was home or in elementary school. That was, as you say, you got to get the A. You only get to take the test once.
Right. And, for me, if I would have told my mom, well, everybody else got, B's or C's or whatever, I don't care about everybody else.
Yeah. Or the other thing is just that idea of there's only one right answer.
Yeah.
And of course, you find out at some point, hopefully, that there's more than one right answer.
Well, it was like math, show your work.
Yeah.
Well, what if I already had the answer and it's not the exact, I'm going to be discredited because the work is not how you wanted it done. But if it's the same answer.
And that's also another way of one right answer. It's not just the answer, it's the how.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of where we've gotten into. We must be corporate. We must be busy. We must be burnt out. We must wear it as a badge. It's not just the deliverable. It's the how. The last corporate job I was in, one of the badges of honor was having a full calendar. Didn't matter you were getting anything done. It meant you were so important that you had 9 hours of meetings a day. And it wasn't about deliverable. It was about being busy.
I had a gentleman who was on the podcast I think the first season now. And he was talking about how he had a meeting. He had been rushed to the hospital. He had diabetes insipidus. And he was rushed to the hospital. And he had a meeting he was supposed to be in. And they basically said, well, are you going to be able to hold the meeting while he's in the ER? Yeah. It's like, no, somebody else is going to have to do this. I mean,
yep.
Where's the value at? And that's kind of, when I look back, like the hotel job and even that entrance job, you got perks. For Christmas, we'll give you a turkey or a ham. For Thanksgiving, we'll give you guys a turkey. We appreciate you. Now it's like, you got a job. Be happy you got a job.
Right.
Okay, but what about peace of mind? If your employees are not happy, there's no productivity.
Right. And that goes back to, are they objects and machines, or are they human beings? And I think we have forgotten what it is to be a human being. There is a TED talk by Tim Lebrecht, who talks about it's either Cambridge or Oxford. By 2030, they were predicting that 50% of the workforce today would be replaced by some sort of computer, some sort of AI. And he said, as we compete with machines, then what is left for us humans is to create what is beautiful rather than what is efficient. And I hope that is part of what's happening with this pandemic and people leaving. It's not about leaving corporate. It's about doing things beautifully instead of efficiently, and saying, I'm not a machine. I am a human being. And there are things that I can do that are unique.
The scary thing about the AI situation is, an AI, excuse me, Chloe, the AI can, write a book. The AI can modulate a human voice. The AI can sit here and have a conversation.
Yes.
I mean, those are the scary things about it, because
what's the truth?
What's the truth? And what is the human component then? If we're turning everything, what truly will be left? If they start invading the arts, then what is truly left?
And I think that comes back to what do we purchase and what do we pay attention to? If we are purchasing things that are created by AI, then that's why. Or are we purchasing things that are produced by machines and only by machines? So it could be, your furniture, which I understand. If it's made by a human, it costs 10 times more as opposed to what's made by, IKEA in a factory.
But that handmade furniture is going to last a lot longer.
I completely agree. And I would prefer that, but I also understand the economics of it,
exactly.
that we all can't either make it ourselves or buy. There's this slow food movement. There's I'm trying to think, it's part of the art movement, but now there is a slow space movement about how to create buildings and how to create interaction with spaces, and just taking that time to consider what is it that is the human element of it. And I think it's beautiful, and I fully support it. I just know the economics of it can be difficult for some people.
And here's the ultimate thing though. Okay. So then you unpack this. If it's too expensive for the human to make the furniture,
right,
then where does the human get money to survive? I mean, we're going to have to change the whole socioeconomic way of the way we live.
Yes. Yep. Or we live on less.
Yeah. And I don't know how that plays out, because I don't know that there's people that are willing to live on less.
And some people can't. Mm-hmm. And I understand that too. And it just comes back to a choice. I have a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. I always go back to, I do a lot of things because of a mortgage.
Yeah.
And if there was no mortgage, which there is an option, there is a plan that where it says there is no mortgage, what would my life be like?
I actually had somebody on the show who her and her husband sold everything they own, and they live in an RV now.
Yeah. No, that's I can't remember if that's C or D, but yes, that's one of them.
But then, you still have other costs, and then you have the constant appreciation of that vehicle. And I know with the popularity of RVs, that they were being thrown together so quickly that they were having issues. So it's one of those things where it's like, where is the balance?
Yeah. I just end up thinking, and this was more a pandemic thing. It's just the fact that if I'm sitting here looking at these walls and all my friends are over Zoom, why am I here? That's where the question comes up, is I could be sitting at the Grand Canyon,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, she said that she's been able to have her job. She has her own business, and they're able to do things still, and they travel the country. They've been to Canada. So it's interesting to see how people are making changes that the white picket fence doesn't need to apply anymore.
Right.
Those norms are being broken. So what is Natural Reflectors?
So part of what I did during the pandemic was create a structure for myself. And out of that came a workbook. I had found over time that I was getting a sense of peace and joy, that looking at the big view and then coming into the details and that cycling back and forth. And I started sharing it with some friends, thinking, this might be a revenue stream, or it might help other people. Let's just see. I had one friend that was going through a course with Georgetown, with the Creator Institute. And I got a conversation with them about the workbook. And they said, well, really, it's better off to start with a book, and then you create the workbook. Then people know why they need the workbook. So Natural Reflectors was the product out of that. Originally, it started off as talking about my story. And as we got through it, because again, iterations, we would put together a bunch of stories and see what stuck. The publisher came back and said, it might be better to broaden this more about developing processes as opposed to, and I'm just a case study in it rather than the case study in it. So the book itself is about promoting this idea of developing your own personal process that includes moments of reflection and moments of action. And a twist on that, the reason it's Natural Reflectors, is I was looking at nature on how to combine those two together. So I would look at the seasons. And so in the Northern Hemisphere, of course, we're starting to get colder. So things are getting darker. And then you expect the winter to be very dark. So that would be more of a time of dreaming. And then in the spring, as things are starting to leaf out, that might be a time when I'd start new things. And in the summer, it would be at the height of all sorts of action. And then in the fall, we start harvesting of that action again. That's an example. But in the book, I go through other examples and a way of being able to find that for yourself. The seasons resonated with me, but it might be different for someone else. My hope is that people would be able to see that there is a different way of thinking than this idea of pushing all the time, that you can create time for yourself, that you could actually enjoy what you're doing as opposed to being a machine, and may even find the ability to do things better. I have this wicked thought that maybe I would actually be more efficient when I'm in this feeling of flow, and I have greater impact than if I was working 80 hours a week as a machine based upon what somebody else said the how. That if I streamline this for the best way that I work, I actually could get more done and a better quality of whatever I was doing. If nothing else, I'll enjoy it a whole lot more, which definitely means that it would be of higher quality.
Well, and that's the thing. If you're not enjoying your job, which I mean, I know jobs are necessities, so don't come at me because of that. But if you're enjoying what you're doing, then it fulfills you. And then it's not so soul sucking. If something is constantly soul sucking, I mean, you hear stories about either the man or the woman that's not only in a bad job, they're in a bad marriage and everything is just miserable. And that's taking years off your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's causing you anxiety. It's causing you stress. And all those things are toxic for your body and your spirit and your soul.
Absolutely. Yeah. One little indicator. So I did actually have a physical recently, and my cholesterol is the best it has ever been. I mean, it is ridiculous. I didn't know your cholesterol could be that good. And I know part of that is stress. Mm-hmm. You know, the fact that I know I'm sleeping better. I actually have every morning I start with a devotional time. And part of that time is I check in with myself and say, what's my energy level? And I assign a number to it. And I can show you those numbers over the last 2 or 3 years on how they have changed. And part of it is just that feeling of, I know what I'm doing. I know I'm doing what I want to do. One of the things for me, though, is I needed or wanted a portfolio. So I have multiple income sources. Part of that is because sometimes you just need to make money. You know, you got to pay the bills.
Yeah.
But I completely understand that being 8 hours or 10 hours a day is destructive. But when I'm able to keep it to 2 to 4 hours a day, it doesn't destroy my soul. It's like, okay, this is what I have to do. And it's okay. It's kind of like doing the laundry. It's like the fact that I need to clean or I need to bathe, you know, those types of things. But it becomes part of life as opposed to the center of my life. And that's kind of what I like about the other things then are the more passionate. And I kind of take that. I don't know how much of that is the gig economy from the millennials, or if it's the retirees, you know, the boomers that are having their own thing going on anyway. You know, they're retiring, but they're still doing something.
Yeah. I mean,
there seems to be a lot of that.
Yeah. For me, you know, when I left the job, I had a hard time because, and this goes back to when you know your job is toxic. I had a hard time figuring out who I was. Even though I was married and everything, I identified so wholeheartedly with being a claims supervisor that I had to unpack it. And it's very much the person who retires from a company. You have your identity attached so much that what do I have? My husband's father, when he left his job, he had a purpose. He took care of his wife and he did things around the house. He was active. But most people that left the company, retired from the company, ended up dying within 5 years.
Yes, I've seen that a number of times. I've known people who said they weren't going to retire. And my response back to them would be, you need a life, you know, there needs to be something that you're going to go to within that, because you just can't.
Well, my dad's going through this kind of now because he was a mechanic. He was still working until the day he had a heart attack and a stroke. He had the stroke, he had the heart attack. Fortunately, neither harmed him where he was impaired. However, he lost his hearing. Right. So, and it's from something else, but he's got tinnitus. He can't hear. So he can't do what he used to do. He was a mechanic. He was a fireman. I mean, in New Orleans, he was a fireman that you could go somewhere and people knew him. Yeah. And I was always amazed by that. And now he's like, I can't talk to anybody because the ringing in my ears is so bad. I can't focus. So now he's left to this little world of, I can get online and look, but I have no life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel for him. I empathize because I mean, it is a hard thing. And I understand the hearing it's a big deal.
Yeah,
It is.
absolutely. Absolutely.
But, and I have said this in the before in the podcast sometimes, and I mean, in the past, we haven't had a great relationship because he never listened to anybody. But I've discovered recently now via text, we're actually rebuilding a relationship. Even though he can't talk, he's thrilled to be able to sit here and text.
Right. And you have
So,
a chance to say something.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So in a way, it's been a blessing. But people need to realize that their job is not their identity. And I think that that goes with even people that are celebrities.
Yeah.
They're still a person.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to that short-term versus long-term view
Yeah.
on whether you're looking just at today or looking beyond today to be able to see what needs to happen.
The whole statement of YOLO,
Mm-hmm.
while it's good and it's you only live once, that's fantastic and everything, but it's a very short-term thing.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And how do I've talked to people before, and my husband was guilty of this. I'm not going to live till I'm to be 30. Okay, well, you made it to 50, 54. So
right. There's a, so I am 52, and there is a cosmetic line, so to speak, by Cindy Joseph that talks about pro-age. And so it's for those over 50. And there was an email recently, one of their newsletters, that literally said, if you live another 50 years, what does that make you think? It's one thing for us to think, oh, I'll only live another 20 years. But if you said, I live another 50 years, that mindset is very different on how you would live your life and what you would do and what matters and what doesn't matter. And
well, yeah, I mean, I was looking at my mortgage the other day, and it's like, oh, gee, I'll be 80 when it's paid off.
Yeah.
I'm like, how does that happen? But it does.
Well, and it's just the fact that we turn them over so quickly. The mortgage companies are like, it'll be all right. I'll still make money off of you.
It's like, 80. But I mean, you can think back to when you were 20. It's kind of like a time is not linear thing, because you can think back to that moment when you were 20, you were like, mortgage, who needs a morttage?
Right.
Life. And that's like, well, I have a house, I have a mortgage, and I gotta make sure this is taken care of. So it's amusing how, as you were saying earlier, it goes back to that, how we evolve and change all the time.
And the choices that we make, like the mortgage or the car payment, that causes us to make choices in our career to fund it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, it's funny because thinking back to when you're younger and you hear your parents talking about, well, I only used to pay this much for this loaf of bread or this gas or whatever. But now you go look at a new car, it's like, wait a second, that's half a mortgage payment. When did that happen?
Yes.
Why am I going to pay for a car that is half my mortgage when I'm not going to live in it? I'm not even in it that often.
Well, or 2020 where it sat in the driveway.
Yeah.
You paid for it to sit or in the garage or whatever it is. Yeah. I actually did that in March. I gave up my car. I was like, I don't know why I'm spending that money.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I live in downtown, so I have other options, and I have a high walkability, and there's free public transportation right now. So it's a very different lifestyle. Even just 5 miles from where I'm living, I wouldn't be able to do this. So it's unique.
When I lived in New Orleans, we used to take the bus a lot, and we had, we would go to, my grandmother and I would go to the grocery store, and on the way back, we splurged and had a taxi.
Yeah. Yep.
But here I live in a small town now, so there's no way I could be without a car.
No, I completely understand that, and that I do think about that. Even though I have this mortgage, I'm allowed to live where I am, which means it's all about a bunch of trade-offs, and you have to take the moment to think about those trade-offs if you're going to make a change.
Right.
And I even talk about that in the book is to take the time to figure out what you want, where you want to go, and what are you willing to do about it, which it might be This is what I want to keep. This is what I'm willing to let go of. This is what I'm willing to upgrade. And that takes time to think about that. And then you know what you want to do. And I think that's the problem, is we don't spend enough time defining that for ourselves. And then therefore we're just letting the world tell us what to do. And that's, I think, where is a lot of the burnout and the unhappiness comes from, is because we haven't sat down and defined what is it we really want.
I don't think we're ever taught to.
We're not.
Think we, I mean, I look back and when I first moved to Chicago, I had come up here. Well, I had lived here for about 8 months. I was in college down in New Orleans and I wasn't happy. And I came up here for a concert and my friend's like, I have an extra bedroom, you can move in. And I'm like, okay. So I walked away from a full ride scholarship at UNO,
right.
and because I wasn't happy. So I walked away. I went back, I flew down there, packed up my car and came back up here. And it's like, there wasn't even a full thought of, you realize what you're walking away from.
Yeah.
I was walking away from things that were toxic and everything else. And it's like, I'm going to come up here. I don't regret it.
But what I was about to say, but something told you this is what you wanted. And we could say it's your gut, it's your intuition, or it was whatever.
We can have a good laugh because that spring, it was March, I had called a radio station and talked to a psychic, and she's like, I see your career based in Chicago. And I'm like, yeah, right, I'm not going back there. And I had a friend that was in the quarter who used to read, and she read with this deck called the Mother of Peace deck, and it was a round deck, and this card was always tilted sideways, and she kept telling me, you're not doing something you're supposed to be doing. Like,
right.
So the day before I left, I went down there because it took me a week to leave. And I went down there and I got a reading, and that card was righted. She goes, you're on the right path now.
Nice.
I'm like, okay.
Nice.
So I did. Yeah. I came up here. My dad was just like, what are you doing? My grandmother was mad. It's just like, sorry, folks. I love you guys, but I'm going to go live my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's assumed that as a child, because you're being, children are always creative and all over the place, that you will express that. But I'm not sure it's ever encouraged or ever said, particularly I've always heard third grade. Third grade is when you need to learn how to sit in a chair and write and do your homework and all of that. And that's where a lot of creativity is squashed. And it's just assumed that you will figure it out. And for those of us who want to abide, or were taught to abide by the system, it's kind of difficult to ever think, what do I really want to do?
I think for me, my creativity wasn't squashed because there were so many changes. And at a certain point, my parents split when I was 9.
Okay.
So at that point, it became, they were focused on other aspects of their life. So I got to start parenting myself. And then my creativity flew with, let me take a loose leaf to your paper and make little people in an apartment and tell a whole story there. And let's watch TV shows and insert myself into them.
Yes.
So my creativity was like, my escape was always there. And that, I guess as toxic as it was sometimes in those situations, it was a benefit because it allowed my mind to create other things.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then to be able to trust your imagination and your gut so that you knew when to go to Chicago. You knew that it was right on how it felt.
The funny thing is, I talked to somebody recently about this, is because my intuition has always been pretty key. And when my parents, before they split, I guess it was the summer before they split.
Yep.
We're all supposed to go to Disney World. And I'm like, I don't want to go. They're like, what? I was like, you guys need time. Now, my parents weren't fighting in front of me, so I had no idea that they were having problems.
Right.
And I'm like, you guys need to spend some time alone. What? Yeah, you guys need to go by yourself. So they did. But why would an 8-year-old of any magnitude say, hey, I'm not going to go?
Yeah.
I wish I would have went now, but
I'm sure. I'm sure. But that is something for an 8-year-old to at least sense.
So I mean, I try to trust my intuition, and I read cards and stuff, and I try to listen to myself. But there's times when, that's the thing about intuition. As much as you trust yourself, your brain can talk you out of things.
Yes, your brain does. And that was part of my exploration. this idea of listening to your gut. And that is where the quality of your decisions. Your brain can logic anything to death. But there's one study from Stanford, from Bill Burnett at the Design Your Life lab at Stanford. And he talks about the fact of if you have more than 5 things to choose from, it's too many and you won't be able to choose it. And he talked about something at a grocery store where you go and you taste jam. And if there were 20 jams, more people came, but less people bought. But when there were only 5, fewer people came, but more people bought. And it wasn't percentage. It was literally more sales because people could navigate it. And that is part of the problem with students today is they have way too many options. Go to college or not go to college, or go to college and how many different majors that you have there. Being able to stop and listen to your body and acknowledge that you have a body as opposed to I'm a machine and this body just carries my computer around. Being able to hear how I feel about the options, whether I even like any of the options in front of me, is a foreign language. And it's something that, just like any other foreign language, we have to spend time cultivating it and learning it because, as you say, your brain will logic just the crap out of it.
Well, as an engineer, it's great to hear you talk about intuition and listening to your gut because you have that whole engineering thing. It's like the reason I loved my insurance job was the research. When I got to investigate an accident or fraud, that was like my brain was all keyed up. However, I am very much creative. I am a creative thinker and I will think outside the box. But there are times when that logic mind will kick in and go, what if you fall flat on your face?
Well, or the other thing is, can we, like reflection and action, can we allow those two to work together? So I always like to say, okay, while I'm reflecting, how am I feeling about these options? Which one feels the best? And then I let my logic take over on how to make it reality.
Smart.
And I'm just directing that logic as opposed to fighting it. I'm just saying, can you give me 5 minutes here? And enough of those logical times of progress, my logic says, yeah, I'll give you 5 or 10 minutes because that was better last time. I agree to let you filter everything out and make a choice.
There's a word I have to ask you about.
Okay.
Failure.
Yeah.
I think, the question I've been posed to a lot when I've done interviews is what does success look like to you? And what does failure look like to you? And it's like, we really need to, I think, I don't want to say take the 2 words out of our vocabulary, but they have such marks there that, and it's all outside factors that make you feel like a failure or feel like a success.
Yep.
So how do we step out of that, dare I say, nutshell and be our authentic self with that and not get caught up in the failure or the success?
I completely agree. It is a tornado that you can get yourself involved with and just spinning with whether you're a success or a failure. And I almost liken it to depression or anxiety or anger. And, I think it's tied to mental health. So like you say, is there a way to either get rid of it or think about it differently? The nice thing about the pandemic is I was able to pull myself out of that situation. I wouldn't say it was like a light switch. It took probably 6 or 9 months to get to the point of feeling differently. I think my definition of success was I want to be happy. I want to be at peace. I know that there is stress in this world, but I don't want to cause 90% of it. There's enough that happens that causes stress. Why am I causing another additional amount of pressure and stress? So I consider that to be successful is to be able to feel confident about the day. And it wasn't that I wasn't confident. It was just that tornado gets you spinning to the point that you can't figure out what to do. That is a luxury that I got to pull myself away from it and start all over with it. I do think it goes back to self-care, being able to determine and decide for yourself that you are important enough to care about. And it's kind of independent of success or failure. It's and one of the little secrets that have come out there is nobody cares. You can be very depressed about the fact that nobody cares because I'm here alone and isolated and all this, but then again, nobody cares. So therefore, I get to decide how I feel. If I did something stupid yesterday, or the fact that I knew this toilet wasn't really right, but now all of a sudden, because of Airbnb, I got to deal with it now. I could think about that as a failure. What I am thinking about, though, is I'm dealing with it beforehand. 10 years ago, I probably said, it's fine. And then something would have happened while they were here. I am saying that is successful. I am taking responsibility, or I'm being proactive. I also take it as a sign as my headspace is in a good space, that I'm willing to take it on.
Yeah.
And that I'm not completely panicking. So I think it's the details that help me determine, and it's the journey. It's not the outcome. That was one of the things while I was writing the book. I never intended to write a book. I was never aspiring to be an author. And if you take the engineer in me, most people think engineers don't know how to write. I had a number of performance reviews that said I was a bad writer. So I'm on this journey, writing this book. Tried a bunch of things and it took me a whole week to write my first story. But once I got that, it was easier for me to write from there. And then when we got to the first chapter, it was cobbling a bunch of stories together. Well, the first one, she said, I like the content. My editor said, I like the content, but I think it needs to be split up and put it somewhere else. We need to start over and get your first chapter together. That was a big deal to be able to do that. Then we got to the point of the first manuscript, which is 25 to 40,000 words. Got that done. And she came back and said, well, there's this one chapter that's a little meaty. I'd like you to split it into 3. Well, I'd already checked it off my list, which I'm really big about. Once it's off my list, I'm done with it.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact of having to bring it back on my list to split that chapter into 3, I didn't have to do it because it was about to point to go from this phase of editing to the next phase of editing. But I had 2 weeks. I said, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I growled the entire time. I was so angry because I had put this thing back on my list. And I stopped and I said, you're not enjoying this. Why are you not enjoying this? And I've gotten to the point, I ask that question a lot. Why? Why are you feeling this way? Why do you feel like a failure? Why do you feel like a success? Because whatever those things are, that's connected to my energy level, and I want more or less of whatever it is, whatever the answer is. And I realized that my definition of a book was something that was printed in a hardbound cover at Barnes & Noble. And so even though I had finished that first manuscript and that editor said, Jennifer, you've written a book, and only 2% of the people out there actually finish writing.
Right.
And so she was saying, even at this point, and that's not about published, that's just writing the manuscript. She congratulated me. It did not absorb because it was not printed hardbound and in Barnes & Noble. And when I realized that, I said, it was a huge milestone to write that story. It was a big deal. And it was a big deal to get that chapter and a big deal to do the manuscript. And it's still a big deal now that I'm published. But I never would have been published if I hadn't hit those other ones.
Right.
And so I feel like that one of my lessons was to intentionally celebrate all those little moments and say, that is a success, if you want to call it whatever, or that's a good thing. Here's a good thing. Here's a good thing. Here's a good thing. And then therefore I can have this more valuable thing later that in the past I might've said, that is the definition of success.
Right.
And, we call it in corporate, we always say milestones and all that stuff, but we never stop and celebrate what it took to get to it. And I think that's that human element we talked about earlier, that we need to acknowledge the effort that it took along the way.
Yeah.
Because it is all a journey.
When you talked about the growling, I remember when my oldest stepdaughter was in 3rd grade, and she transferred schools in the middle of the year, and her teacher made her write a story.
Yeah.
And she had never written a story before, and she sat there and she cried for like an hour and a half. And I'm like, Michelle, we can do this. You can do this. It's no problem. You can do this. And she cried and cried and cried. And finally she's like, I'm like, just try it. And she did it. And then she looks at me and she goes, I guess I could have done it. If I wouldn't have cried, it would have been okay. I would have had it done sooner. I'm like, mm-hmm.
You
But
could
she
have.
had to find that out, because there's times when we just don't want to do things because it's like, yeah, I'm done. But when we go back and revisit it, it's actually turns out better sometimes.
Right. Right.
It's
Or we
like
just didn't.
go
We
ahead.
just didn't believe we could do it. I mean, or we were scared of doing it, or we had expectations. I think that's why it took me my first story. I was looking for perfection.
Well, and I've had people talk about perfection on the podcast and talking about managing your expectations. And I think those are all things that we don't necessarily, we're never taught these things. We're always taught
No,
these fundamentals in school about math and reading and English. And they're all important. And I'm not saying they're not, but we're not taught life skills.
no, we're not. We're not.
And we're still worried about creating who we're going to be in the future. But part of those things in the future that would help kids would be those life skills.
Yeah. Dell just in the last couple of years did a whole study on Gen Z and surveyed about 12,000 Gen Z talking about how they felt about the future. And of course, they are digitally amazing because they've grown up with it all and that's no big deal. But they are terrified of the soft skills.
Well,
and particularly those that are in college right now, the university I work with, they're talking about we really have 2 freshman classes because the sophomores didn't have a freshman class.
right.
They don't know anything about the university. They don't know how to get through everything. It was just like what they did in high school the year before if they were, in lockdown. So it's difficult if you don't or aren't able to practice the face-to-face stuff.
Well, and I mean, here's the whole thing about that. Technology is great, but if something were to happen, except now most of us don't know our phone numbers and we wouldn't be able to use our phones anyway.
I would be able to call.
But we still could function somewhat.
Yeah.
The younger generations that don't know anything, how are they going to function?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's something that I know how to drive a manual transmission. A lot of people don't. Now it's like, stick, what? I got paddle shifters. I don't need a stick. I got paddle. No, it's not the same thing.
No.
So no. I think when we look, as technology increases, and I think it's great. I love technology and it makes my job as a writer a lot easier to be able to research. But I also think it harms us in a way because it's like taking away some of that critical thinking. I mean, I'm 54. So, you went to school. If you walked into grammar school with a calculator.
Yes.
That's being picked up from the teacher and shoved into a desk. And because my parents got me a Disney World calculator. So I bring it into the show and tell, and my teacher's like, that's going to my desk until the end of the day. You pull it out for show and tell, and that's it.
Yep. And all it could do was add, subtract, multiply, divide. Mm-hmm. That was all it could do.
Yep. But nope, you can't have it. And you heard this from your teachers. You will never have a calculator in school and you'll never use a calculator.
My freshman year in college, we actually had, and here we carry it with us. My freshman year in college, we actually had a test in freshman engineering to make sure, because we all had different calculators, to make sure that we all knew how to use our calculators because they didn't want that to be the barrier in our test.
Wow.
I mean, we had a class where we went through and said, okay, here's a bunch of math assignments. Make sure you know how to use your calculator.
How things have changed.
I know. But like you say, I've gotten to the point I'm like, I don't even bother trying to do it in my head.
No.
Because I'm like this oracle will always be with me. And I do look to Gen Z for how they're going to marry analog with digital. The millennials are really good with digital and us at Gen X are really good with analog, but Gen Z is going to figure that out, which is going to make our retirement really good.
One can hope.
Yes. When we're 80 and we need a wearable, we're going to have wearables that mean things.
Yes, that would be good. That would be very good. Well, is there, it's been a fascinating conversation. I've enjoyed talking to you. Is there anything you want to add that we didn't cover?
No, but I've enjoyed this as well. This has been a lot of fun, meandering and just seeing where things go. Been absolutely fun. Thank you.
And I'm going to say for you guys that are listening, if you really want to see the artwork, go to the YouTube channel. The video will be up and you can see the artwork, the string art that I was talking about. So
very good.
Take care. When I discovered Buzzsprout, I was about 30 or 40 episodes already in, and I thought, I really think they have a lot of opportunities here and a lot of options for me to explore, but it's going to be a lot of work to move the podcast. Wrong. It was so simple. It was a click of the button and everything transferred over seamlessly. And bonus, I got a website out of it, a website that has all my social media links for the podcast, and everything in there is central in one place. What could be more convenient? I mean, honestly. Then, besides that, a couple of clicks of buttons, and I'm on every major platform. It was simple. And you know, you want to build your audience, you want to be on every platform you can. And also, the other thing was analytics. The analytics were top of the line. So if you have a podcast already and you want to move it, I would highly recommend doing it with Buzzsprout. And if you're new to the podcasting business, Buzzsprout is the way to go. And right now, if you follow the link in the show notes and tell Buzzsprout we sent you, it'll get you a $20 gift card if you sign up for our paid plan, which helps support our show, and we would greatly appreciate it. The only thing is, remember, before you freak out if you don't get it after you get one paid month, it takes two before you get that Amazon gift card. So check Buzzsprout out. I'm sure you would be happy, and let's create something together and come over to Buzzsprout. I enjoyed my conversation with Jennifer. Talking about intuition with an engineer is kind of amusing to me because you think of an engineer as being so critically thinking and not always listening to their gut. So that was a very pleasant surprise. I also like the fact that we kind of dissected success and failure, and we talked about self-care and what we need to do to pursue our passion. And those are kind of important things that all of us can learn from, and I think help us have a more fulfilling life. So I hope you enjoyed the show. You can follow us, at the better2podcast.com. That's where all the episodes are located, as well as all of our social links. If you want to donate to the podcast, we have a Patreon account, and you can find us that also on the webpage. If you would like to be a guest or have a question regarding the podcast and you want to reach out to one of the guests and you can't find some information, just email me at Donna@better2podcast.com. That's DAUNA at better2podcast.com. As always, I appreciate your support and I thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time, guys. Bye. The Better 2 Podcast is mixed, edited, and produced by Rich Side of Third Year Audio Productions.